It was one of those sunny Saturday mornings that made everything look brighter than it really was. The sky was wide and blue over the Atlanta airport, and the sound of planes taking off filled the air like a steady heartbeat. Among the crowd of workers, travelers, and noisy luggage carts, a small boy walked with wide eyes and an excited smile. His name was Malik Thompson, and he was only 12 years old. Malik wasn't at the airport to travel anywhere. He was there because his uncle, Ray, worked as a maintenance technician. Every now and then, Ray would let Malik come with him when the weekend shifts weren't too busy. It was their special routine. Malik loved airplanes. He didn't care much about video games or cartoons the way most of his friends did. What made his heart beat faster was the sound of engines roaring to life and the smell of jet fuel in the air. That morning, Ray had promised him that if things stayed calm, he could watch a private jet being prepared for takeoff. Malik could hardly believe it. He had seen big commercial planes before, but private jets were something else. Smaller, shinier, like something out of a movie. They walked across the service area where engineers were checking wheels, cleaning windows, and loading supplies. Malik held onto a small notebook he always carried. He liked to draw what he saw: the shape of wings, the position of engines, even the markings on the tails. Ray smiled at him. "You're quiet today," he said as they passed a row of orange cones. "You good?" Malik nodded, still watching the planes. "I just don't want to miss anything." Ray laughed softly. "You sound like one of us already." They reached the far end of the tarmac, where a white and silver jet stood gleaming in the sunlight. Its surface was so clean it reflected the sky. A crew of mechanics was busy under the wings doing final checks. Malik stayed back a few steps, knowing not to get in anyone's way. "See that one?" Ray said, pointing at the jet. "That's the one I told you about. Belongs to some big tech guy. Worth billions, they say." Malik's eyes widened. "A billionaire?" "Yeah, the man built some computer company or something. Don't ask me what it does. All I know is that jet probably costs more than this whole building." Malik grinned. "It's beautiful." Ray patted his shoulder. "It is, but remember, beauty don't fly planes. Maintenance does." Malik laughed at that, but he knew his uncle was serious. Ray always said safety came before everything. Planes didn't forgive mistakes. Every bolt, every wire, every panel mattered. Malik had heard those words so many times he could repeat them like a prayer. While Ray went to sign off some papers, Malik sat on a bench nearby, sketching the jet in his notebook. The sun glinted off its metal surface. The mechanics moved quickly, carrying toolboxes and wiping oil off their hands. One of them climbed up a ladder to inspect a wing. Another crouched near the landing gear. Malik's pencil moved across the paper, but he wasn't just drawing. He was watching. He always watched. After a while, something caught his eye. A small silver panel beneath the left wing seemed to shake a little in the breeze. It was barely noticeable, the kind of thing no one would care about. But to Malik, it looked strange. Panels like that were supposed to be tight and still. He looked around. The mechanic who had been under that wing was already walking away, talking to another worker. They were laughing about something. Malik hesitated. Maybe he was imagining it. He didn't want to get in trouble for bothering them. Still, his eyes went back to the panel. It moved again, just slightly, like it wasn't screwed in right. He frowned and stood up, shading his eyes from the sun. That was when he noticed something else. A small metal tool lay on the ground near the wheel. It looked like a wrench. Nobody had picked it up. Malik bit his lip. He remembered how his uncle always said, "No tool gets left behind. One forgotten wrench can ruin a flight." He looked around for Ray, but his uncle was still at the maintenance office talking to someone on the radio. Malik walked a few steps closer to the jet, careful not to cross the safety line. The hum of the engines preparing nearby was loud enough to shake his chest. He crouched slightly, trying to get a better look at the spot under the wing. The mechanic who had worked there was long gone. The panel was definitely loose. Not enough to fall, but enough to make Malik uneasy. And near the fuel connection point, there was a tiny gap that didn't look right. He'd seen planes close up before, and those gaps were never there. He whispered to himself, "That's not supposed to be open." A group of workers walked past, joking and shouting over the noise, but no one seemed to notice. Malik's stomach twisted. He wasn't sure if he should say something or wait for Ray. But what if the plane took off before Ray came back? The thought scared him. He could already hear the pilot running pre-flight checks inside. The jet's door was open and a man in a dark suit was walking up the steps. Maybe that was the billionaire. Malik's heart pounded faster. He remembered watching videos with his uncle about aircraft accidents. How one small mistake could bring down an entire plane. The missing bolt. The wrong fuel cap. The loose wire. It only took one thing. He looked again at the ground and saw that the wrench had a smear of oil on it. Someone had definitely used it recently. "Uncle Ray," he shouted. But his voice was lost in the roar of another plane taking off nearby. He tried again, louder, but Ray was too far away. He turned back to the jet. The mechanic who had been there earlier was now walking toward the hangar, wiping his hands on a rag. Malik ran a few steps toward him and called out, "Hey, sir! Excuse me." The man glanced back, surprised. "What's up, kid?" Malik pointed at the wing. "That panel, it's moving." "I think it's loose." The mechanic frowned, clearly annoyed. "It's fine." "Don't worry about it. Go back to your uncle." "But I saw—" "It's fine, kid. Everything's checked." The man waved and walked away. Malik stood there, unsure what to do. His hands were shaking a little. He looked at the plane again. The wind picked up and the panel shifted just slightly, enough for him to see the dark space beneath it. He didn't know much about engineering, but he knew that something wasn't right. He felt a tightness in his chest. That feeling when you just know something bad could happen if you stay quiet. The pilot was climbing into the cockpit now. Malik's eyes darted between the loose panel and the tool on the ground. He couldn't stand it anymore. He took a deep breath and shouted with everything he had, "Stop!" The plane was tampered with. The words came out louder than he expected, echoing across the tarmac. Heads turned. The workers froze. The man in the suit stopped on the steps, confused. A couple of security officers looked over immediately. Malik's face burned red, but he didn't back down. "Please don't let it take off." "There's something wrong under the wing." Within seconds, 2 airport staff members came running toward him. One of them looked irritated. "What's going on here?" "Kid, you can't shout things like that at an airport." Malik pointed again, his hand trembling. "Look under the wing. The panel's loose. Someone forgot something." By then, Ray had heard the commotion and came rushing over. "Malik, what are you doing?" he shouted, grabbing the boy by the shoulder. "I'm sorry," Malik said quickly, "but I saw something. The panel's open and there's a wrench left on the ground." Ray looked at him, then at the workers standing around. The pilot was still on the stairs, watching. A few people had gathered, whispering. One of the engineers sighed. "This better be worth the delay," he muttered and walked toward the wing with a flashlight. Malik's heart was pounding so hard it hurt. He didn't know if he'd done the right thing or if he was about to be yelled at by everyone. The engineer crouched near the spot Malik had pointed to. He tugged gently on the panel and then it shifted. The man froze. "Wait a second," he said quietly. He reached for his radio. "Control, hold the takeoff." "Repeat, hold the takeoff." Everyone fell silent. Malik watched as more crew members came running with tools. They opened the panel completely and shone lights inside. Within seconds, one of them let out a low whistle. "Who worked on this fuel valve?" the engineer asked sharply. "This isn't sealed right. It could have leaked midair." Ray's face went pale. He looked down at Malik, then back at the jet. The pilot stepped down from the stairs, realizing what was happening. The man in the suit stood frozen, staring at the boy who had shouted. Malik just stood there, shaking a little, not sure if he was in trouble or had just stopped something terrible. No one spoke for a few moments. Then one of the workers turned and said quietly, "The kid was right." Ray knelt down beside Malik. His voice was soft now. "You saw that from all the way over there?" Malik nodded. "It didn't look right." Ray didn't say anything for a moment. He just put a hand on the boy's shoulder and looked at the plane, then at the men who were fixing the problem. Around them, the hum of the airport continued, planes landing, luggage carts rolling, people moving. But for that one moment, everything felt still. Malik didn't know it yet. But what he did that morning would soon be on every news channel, in every newspaper, and on every social media feed. A small boy who refused to stay quiet had just saved a man's life. A man who owned half the technology the world used every day. But for now, Malik just wanted to go home. He looked up at Ray and whispered, "Did I do something bad?" Ray shook his head slowly. "No, son. You did something real good." Malik didn't smile. He just stared at the jet as the workers tightened every bolt again, making sure nothing like that would ever be missed. Somewhere deep inside, though, he already knew this was the start of something big. The next few minutes at the airport were filled with confusion. Workers talked over each other. Security officers asked questions, and everyone wanted to know how a 12-year-old boy had noticed something the trained crew had missed. Malik stood quietly beside his uncle, clutching his small notebook to his chest. He didn't know if he should feel proud or scared. The pilot, a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes, walked over. "This the boy who shouted?" he asked, his voice half curious, half irritated. Ray nodded, still trying to understand everything himself. "Yeah, my nephew. Said he saw something under the wing." The pilot looked down at Malik. "You caused quite a scare, young man." Malik opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. The words stuck in his throat. The pilot sighed and turned to one of the engineers. "What did you find?" The engineer showed him the loose panel and the unsealed valve. "Fuel line wasn't closed properly. If we'd taken off, pressure could have caused a leak. Maybe worse." Everyone went silent for a second. Even the pilot's stern face softened. He looked back at Malik. "You saw that from a distance?" Malik nodded. "I just noticed it moving. It didn't look right." The pilot didn't say anything else. He just looked at the boy a moment longer before walking away to make a call. Ray crouched next to Malik. "You okay?" "I didn't mean to shout," Malik said softly. I didn't want anyone to get hurt." Ray gave a small smile. "You did the right thing. Don't ever apologize for that." Before Malik could answer, a man in a navy suit approached them. He had dark sunglasses and a calm but serious look. "Sir, I'm from the private security team for Mr. Harlow," he said. "I need to speak with you and the boy." Ray frowned slightly. "About what?" "Mr. Harlow wants to meet him." "He's the one whose jet this is." Malik blinked. "The billionaire? The one they'd talked about earlier?" Ray hesitated, unsure, but the guard reassured him it was okay. "He just wants to thank him. You can come along." They followed the guard across the tarmac toward a waiting black SUV parked near the hangar. The crowd behind them was still buzzing with talk about the discovery. Malik could hear pieces of conversation, words like lucky, unbelievable, and kids got eyes like a hawk. As they approached the SUV, the door opened, and a man stepped out. He looked to be in his late 40s, dressed in a dark gray suit with no tie, his sleeves rolled up slightly. He didn't look like the kind of person who ran a billion-dollar company. His expression was calm, but there was a trace of surprise in his eyes when he saw Malik. "So," the man said, walking closer, "you're the one who stopped my plane?" Malik swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir." "I didn't mean to cause trouble," the man smiled faintly. "Trouble? You probably saved my life." Ray cleared his throat.
"Sir, we didn't know what was going on."
"The boy just saw something off. We're sorry for the delay," but the man shook his head. "Don't be sorry. You should be proud." He crouched slightly so he was eye level with Malik. "What's your name, son?" "Malik." "Malik," the man repeated. "You know, I've flown in and out of airports for 20 years. I've got the best engineers money can buy. But today it wasn't any of them who saw the danger. It was you." Malik looked down, shy. "I just noticed it didn't look right. That's all," the man smiled again. "Sometimes that's all is the difference between life and death." He reached out and shook Malik's small hand. "Thank you, Malik." Ray stood quietly beside them, proud but still processing what was happening. The man turned to one of his assistants and said, "Make sure the boy and his uncle get clearance to stay here until the investigation is over." Then, to Malik, he added, "Would you like to see the inside of the jet? I think you've earned it." Malik's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," the man said with a chuckle. "Come on." They climbed the small stairs into the jet. Inside it looked like something from a dream. Soft cream-colored seats, screens built into the walls, and a faint smell of leather and coffee. Malik ran his hand over one of the seats, afraid to even breathe too hard. "This is amazing," he whispered. The man smiled at Ray. "He's got good instincts. You should keep him close to this kind of work." "I'm trying," Ray said. "He loves this stuff more than anything." They talked a bit more about planes and how Malik wanted to be an engineer someday. The man listened carefully, asking real questions, not just polite ones. It felt strange, someone that powerful, taking real interest in a kid from the south side of Atlanta. When they stepped out of the jet again, news reporters had already arrived at the gate nearby. Somehow the story had spread faster than anyone expected. Malik saw cameras and people pointing, whispering. Ray frowned. "We should get going before this gets crazy." The man nodded. "I'll have my team handle the press. You two deserve a quiet exit." He looked at Malik again. "You know, people talk about heroes like they're wearing capes or armor, but sometimes it's just someone who pays attention." Malik smiled for the first time all day. "Thank you, sir." The man nodded, then walked back to his car. Malik and Ray started heading toward the staff building. But before they could go far, one of the security officers called out, "Sir, they want both of you to stay for a bit. Investigation's ongoing." Ray sighed but agreed. They waited in a small office while the engineers continued checking the aircraft. Malik sat by the window watching. He could see them pulling out parts, checking fuel lines, testing sensors. Every so often, one of them would look toward the office and shake their head, amazed. After about an hour, an airport official entered the room with a clipboard. He was sweating under his safety vest. "We just finished inspection," he said. "Turns out the kid's not only right, and he might have saved everyone from a disaster." That valve was nearly off. Could have caused a mid-air fire. Ray let out a slow breath. "Good Lord," the official smiled at Malik. "You've got good eyes, son. You should think about a career in aviation. We could use more people like you." Malik blushed and looked down. "I just like planes." "Yeah," the man said. "And that's exactly why you saw what no one else did." A little later, when they finally left the airport, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. The air was warm and smelled faintly of jet fuel in summer. Malik held his notebook under his arm as they walked to the car. Ray glanced at him. "You feeling okay?" Malik nodded slowly. "Yeah, just tired." Ray smiled. "You did good, kid. You really did." The ride home was quiet. Malik watched out the window, seeing planes in the distance climbing into the sky, their engines glowing against the fading light. Each one looked perfect from afar, but he knew now how much could go wrong if someone didn't pay attention. When they got home, Malik's aunt was waiting on the porch, worried. "What took you two so long?" she asked. Ray just laughed and said, "You won't believe it even if I tell you." They went inside, and he told her everything. How Malik had stopped a plane from taking off, how the billionaire had thanked him, how the airport was still buzzing about it. Malik sat at the kitchen table eating a sandwich, pretending not to listen, but his cheeks turned red as his aunt gasped and said, "My goodness, that boy's a hero." Ray looked at him. "You hear that? You're famous now." Malik shook his head quickly. "I don't want to be famous." "What do you want then?" He thought for a moment, then said quietly, "I just want to learn how to fix planes right, so nobody ever has to get hurt." Ray smiled proudly. "That's a good dream." That night, Malik couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that loose panel again, the silver metal shining in the sunlight. He kept hearing the sound of his own voice shouting, "Stop! The plane was tampered with." He wondered what would have happened if he hadn't said anything. The thought made his stomach twist. He got out of bed and went to his small desk by the window. In his notebook, next to his sketch of the jet, he drew another picture, this time the loose panel with arrows showing where the bolt had been missing. He wrote a note under it, "Always check everything twice." Down the hall, Ray peeked into the room. "You're still up?" Malik turned around. "Yeah, just drawing." Ray walked in and leaned on the doorframe. "You know the man you met today, Mr. Harlow? He's one of the richest people in the country. But when he shook your hand, I could tell something changed in him." Malik tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Ray smiled. "Sometimes people with everything forget what matters. Maybe you reminded him." Malik didn't know what to say, so he just smiled faintly. "Get some sleep," Ray said. "Tomorrow you're still just my nephew who's got chores to do." Malik laughed softly. "Okay." When Ray left, Malik looked out the window one last time. Somewhere beyond the dark trees, the airport lights glowed faintly. Planes were still coming and going, their red lights blinking across the sky. He whispered to himself, "One day I'll be out there too." Then he closed his notebook, climbed into bed and drifted off to sleep, not knowing that by morning, the world would know his name. When Malik woke up the next morning, the house was unusually quiet. The sunlight coming through the blinds was soft and golden, and for a moment everything felt normal again. But as soon as he stepped into the kitchen, he realized it wasn't going to be an ordinary day. His uncle was sitting at the table with his phone pressed to his ear. a half-finished cup of coffee in front of him. The TV on the counter was playing the morning news, and Malik froze when he heard his own name. 12-year-old Malik Thompson is being praised as a hero after preventing what could have been a deadly accident at the Atlanta airport yesterday. Malik's eyes widened. His sketchbook slipped from his hands and hit the floor. Ray hung up the phone slowly and looked at him. "You're on every channel, kid." Malik blinked. "What?" Ray pointed at the TV. "They've been calling all morning. Reporters, news people, even the airport director. You've gone viral." On the screen, a photo of Malik from the airport played alongside a video of workers checking the jet. The reporter's voice continued. Sources say the private jet belonged to billionaire tech founder Richard Harlow, who personally thanked the boy for his quick thinking. Investigators confirmed the plane had a mechanical fault that could have led to a mid-air explosion. Malik just stared. It didn't feel real. His aunt came in with a towel over her shoulder. "You're famous, baby. Everybody's talking about you. My phone's been blowing up since 6 this morning." Malik sat down slowly. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Ray chuckled. "Nobody ever does. But when you save a billionaire's life, people notice." He didn't feel like a hero. He hadn't done it for attention. He had just shouted because something didn't look right. Now the whole world seemed to know his name. By mid-morning, 2 cars pulled up outside the house. When Ray looked through the window, he sighed. "Here we go," he muttered. Reporters. They stepped out with cameras and microphones, smiling politely but moving quickly. Within minutes, they were knocking on the door. Ray opened it halfway. "Morning, folks, can I help you?" A woman with a press badge held up her microphone. "We're from Channel 7 News. We were hoping to speak with Malik for a few minutes, just a quick interview." Ray frowned. "He's a kid, he's still in school." "We understand, sir," the woman said quickly, "but this story has inspired people everywhere. He's being called the boy who saved the billionaire." Malik, standing behind his uncle, winced a little at that name. Ray sighed, then looked at him. "You okay with it?" Malik hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a few minutes." The reporters came inside and set up a small camera in the living room. Malik sat on the couch, his feet not even touching the floor. The woman smiled kindly at him. "So, Malik," she began, "how did you know something was wrong with the plane?" Malik shrugged slightly. "I just saw the panel move. It didn't look normal." "Were you scared to shout?" "A little," he said honestly, "but I thought if I didn't, something bad could happen." The woman smiled. "Well, your quick thinking saved lives. People everywhere are calling you a hero. How does that feel?" Malik thought for a moment. "It feels strange. I just did what I thought was right." When the interview ended, the crew thanked him and left. Ray ruffled Malik's hair. "You handled that better than I would have." By afternoon, more calls came in. Schools, newspapers, even a few companies wanting to honor him. Ray tried to shield Malik from most of it, but it was impossible to stop everything. Later that day, a black SUV pulled up again, the same kind that had come to the airport. Malik peeked through the curtain. "It's him," he whispered. Ray opened the door, and there stood Richard Harlow himself, dressed simply in a blue shirt and jeans, carrying an envelope. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said with a friendly smile. Ray blinked. No, sir, come in." Harlow stepped inside and looked around the modest living room. He smiled at Malik. "There's the man of the hour." Malik blushed. "Hi, sir." "I just came to thank you again," Harlow said. "Yesterday could have ended very differently. My crew told me what they found. It wasn't just a mistake. Someone tampered with the plane." Ray frowned. "Tampered? You mean?" Harlow nodded slowly. "The investigators are still looking into it, but it looks like someone loosened the fuel line on purpose." Malik's eyes widened. "On purpose?" "Yes," Harlow said gently. "But don't worry, the police are handling it now." The room went quiet for a moment. Malik didn't like the idea that someone would do that. Not just a mistake, but something meant to hurt people. It made his skin crawl. Harlow sighed softly. "You didn't just stop an accident, Malik. You might have stopped something far worse. Ray crossed his arms. You think someone was trying to target you? Harlow didn't answer directly. Let's just say in my world, competition gets complicated. He turned back to Malik and smiled again. That's not your concern, though. What matters is, you trusted your instincts. He handed Malik the envelope. Inside was a printed letter and a scholarship certificate. That, Harlow said, is a full educational scholarship. Any aviation or engineering school you choose when you're older. All expenses paid. Malik stared at it speechless. Are you serious? Completely, Harlow said. Consider it a thank you gift. You saved my life, Malik. I can't put a price on that, but I can make sure you have a future doing what you love. Malik looked up at Ray, who smiled proudly. Take it, kid. You earned it. Malik turned back to Harlow. Thank you, sir. Harlow smiled. You earned it, son. They talked for a few more minutes. Harlow asked about Malik's drawings, and Malik showed him his sketchbook. The billionaire turned each page carefully, nodding. You've got talent and a good eye. That's a rare combination. Before leaving, Harlow said, I'll be in touch. You remind me of me when I was your age. Curious and stubborn. When the SUV finally pulled away, Malik stood by the window for a long time, staring after it. That night, their house phone didn't stop ringing. Friends, teachers, even neighbors wanted to talk to Malik. Some called him a genius. Others said he was lucky. But Malik didn't feel like either. He just kept thinking about what Harlow had said, that someone had tampered with the plane on purpose. That part wouldn't leave his mind. He sat on his bed later that night, sketching another plane in his notebook. This time, he drew the inside of the engine and labeled each part he could remember. He wanted to learn more, to understand how things worked, how they failed, and how to keep them from failing. Ray knocked on the door and came in. You okay, kid? Malik nodded. Yeah, I'm just thinking. Ray sat on the edge of the bed. About today? About everything, Malik said quietly. What if I hadn't seen it? Ray sighed. Then it might have gone bad, but you did see it. That's what matters. Malik looked at him. Do you think someone really wanted to hurt him? Ray hesitated. I don't know, Malik. There are people out there who do crazy things for money or revenge, but it's not your job to carry that weight. You did what you could. Malik nodded, though the thought still bothered him. The next morning, the front porch was covered in envelopes, letters, cards, even small packages. People had sent messages from all over the country. Some were from children saying he inspired them. Others were from pilots, engineers, and mechanics thanking him for reminding the world that attention saves lives. His aunt brought one in. This one's from a pilot in Texas, she said. He says you've made everyone double-check their planes twice before takeoff. Malik smiled softly. That's good. Later that afternoon, a call came from the airport. They were hosting a small event to honor Malik. Nothing fancy, just a recognition ceremony. Malik didn't want to go at first, but Ray convinced him. It's good for people to see the person behind the story, he said. At the event, Malik wore his Sunday clothes, nervous as cameras flashed around him. The airport director gave a short speech about safety, awareness, and bravery. When Malik's name was called, he walked to the stage, heart pounding. He didn't know what to say when they handed him a plaque that read, "In recognition of bravery and vigilance." He just smiled awkwardly while people clapped. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the crowd. I'm not a hero, he said quietly. I just saw something that didn't look right. Anyone could have seen it. I just spoke up. The crowd went quiet, listening closely. My uncle always says every little thing matters on a plane. I guess he's right. I'm glad I paid attention. Then he smiled shyly and stepped back. The applause filled the room. After the ceremony, reporters tried to ask more questions, but Malik just stayed close to his uncle. He felt proud, but also tired. It had been a lot for 1 week. When they finally left the airport and got into the car, Ray looked at him. How do you feel now? Malik smiled faintly. Like I just want to go back to watching planes. Ray laughed. That's the spirit. As they drove past the runway, Malik looked out at the planes lined up in the evening light. Somewhere in one of those hangars, the jet he had saved was still being inspected. He imagined the people working on it carefully, double-checking every screw, every wire. He didn't know what the future would bring, or what the truth behind that tampering really was. But deep down, he knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning of something much bigger than himself. A few weeks passed, but the story of the boy who saved the billionaire still floated around like a quiet echo. People had mostly moved on to other news, but for Malik, nothing really went back to normal. At school, classmates looked at him differently. Some smiled and whispered when he walked by. Others wanted to sit with him at lunch just to say they knew the hero kid. Teachers treated him with new respect, but Malik didn't like the attention. He just wanted to be a regular boy again. One afternoon after school, he sat under a tree near the football field, sketching an airplane in his notebook. His best friend Darnell walked over with a juice box. "Man, you still drawing planes?" Darnell said, sitting down next to him. Malik smiled faintly. "Yeah, I can't help it." "You could draw anything and you'd still pick planes," Darnell joked. "So what's it like being famous now?" Malik sighed. "It's weird. People treat me different. Even the principal called me sir the other day." Darnell laughed. "You saved a billionaire, dude. You're like part of history now." Malik looked down at his drawing. "I didn't save him because he was rich. I didn't even know who he was." "I know," Darnell said, taking a sip of his drink. "But the world loves stories like that." Malik didn't answer. He kept shading the wings of the jet he'd drawn, lost in thought. That night, when he got home, his Uncle Ray was watching the news. The story about the incident had come up again, not because of Malik this time, but because investigators had released their findings. Ray turned up the volume. The reporter was saying, "Authorities have confirmed that the private jet belonging to Richard Harlow was tampered with intentionally. A former maintenance contractor is now in custody. Officials say his actions could have caused a catastrophic explosion." Malik froze. The reporter continued, "Sources say the motive appears to be tied to corporate sabotage, though details remain under investigation. Richard Harlow's company has declined to comment." Ray looked at Malik. "Well, that answers that." Malik sank into the couch. "So someone really did want to hurt him?" Ray nodded slowly. "Looks that way." The thought made Malik's stomach twist. He remembered the loose panel, the wrench on the ground, the laughter of the mechanic walking away. He wondered if that had been the man they arrested. The next day, Malik's story appeared on TV again, but this time the focus was different. Reporters weren't just calling him the boy who saved a billionaire. They were calling him the boy who stopped a crime. It didn't make him feel better. He started avoiding the news altogether. At night, he'd close his window blinds, shut off his phone, and draw quietly until he fell asleep. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail addressed to him. The envelope had the logo of Harlow Technologies. Malik's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. It said, "Malik, I wanted you to hear this from me, not the news. The man who tampered with the plane has been caught." He worked for a rival company that has been under investigation for months. If you hadn't noticed that panel, they would have succeeded in something that could have changed many lives forever. I can't thank you enough for what you did. I've been thinking about how to properly repay your courage. You'll be receiving something soon that I hope will help you keep following your passion. Stay curious. Richard Harlow. Malik read the letter twice. He wasn't sure what to feel. Proud, scared, or just tired. A few days later, a large package arrived at their doorstep. Inside was a model jet engine kit, along with a note that read, "For the future engineer." There was also a signed photograph of Harlow with a simple message. "You saved more than a plane. You reminded the world that courage has no age." Malik smiled for the first time in days. He set the model on his desk and spent hours carefully putting it together piece by piece. It wasn't easy, but he liked the challenge. While Malik was focused on building, things outside his little world were changing. Harlow's company had launched an internal investigation, and soon it became public that the sabotage was part of a much bigger plot. News networks buzzed with updates, but Malik didn't pay much attention. He preferred the quiet hum of his small desk fan and the sound of plastic parts clicking together. One evening, Ray came into his room holding a newspaper. "You might want to see this," he said. Malik took the paper and saw a picture of Harlow shaking hands with government officials. The headline read, "Harlow thanks young hero, calls for new aviation safety initiative." The article explained that Harlow was launching a program to support young people interested in aviation, scholarships, workshops, and training camps. And the very first one was named after Malik. Malik's eyes widened. "The Malik Thompson Initiative?" He read out loud. Ray grinned. "You've got a whole program named after you now." "I don't even know what to say," Malik whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Ray said. "Just keep being you." A few weeks later, they were invited to attend the program's opening event. It was held at the same airport where everything had happened. Malik felt nervous walking through those gates again, but Ray stayed by his side. The event was bigger than anything Malik had imagined. Reporters were there again, along with students from all over the state who dreamed of working with planes. There were banners, speeches, and even a small exhibit showing the jet that Malik had saved. When it was time for Malik to speak, he stepped up to the microphone, his heart racing. Cameras flashed and the crowd waited. He took a deep breath. "I didn't plan to be here," he began softly. "I was just at the airport with my uncle. I saw something that didn't look right and I said something. That's all." He looked at the rows of young faces watching him. "Sometimes people think you need to be grown up or important to make a difference," he said. "But I learned that even if you're just a kid, your voice matters. If something feels wrong, say something. You never know who you might help." The room fell silent for a second, then applause filled the space. Some people stood clapping and cheering. After the event, Harlow approached him. "You spoke well," he said. "You've got a gift for connecting with people." Malik smiled shyly. "I just told the truth. That's why it worked," Harlow said. "Truth always connects." He placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "You ever thought about flying one day, not just fixing?" Malik blinked. "Flying?" "Yeah," Harlow said with a grin. "If you can save a plane, you can probably fly one too." Malik laughed. "Maybe someday." "Someday soon," Harlow said. "You've got the eyes of a pilot." As they left the event, Malik felt lighter than he had in weeks. The sky was wide and open, just like it had been that first day. But this time it didn't feel intimidating. It felt full of promise. On the way home, Ray said, "You handled that like a pro. I saw grown men tearing up during your speech." Malik laughed. "I was shaking the whole time." "Didn't show," Ray said proudly. The following days were quiet again, and Malik liked that. He spent his afternoons studying planes, reading books about engineering, and watching videos about aerodynamics. His model jet sat proudly on his shelf. One evening, while he was helping his aunt with dishes, the phone rang. Ray answered, then handed it to Malik. "It's for you," he said. "Someone from Harlow Technologies." Malik took the phone, confused. "Hello?" A warm voice replied, "Malik, this is Richard. I just wanted to let you know we've officially launched the scholarship fund in your name today. You're part of our company's family now." Malik smiled. "That's amazing. Thank you, sir." "No, thank you," Harlow said. "You reminded us that no matter how big or small someone is, they can change the course of things." "Keep being that kind of person, Malik." "I will," Malik said softly. After hanging up, he stood by the window, watching the lights outside flicker. Planes blinked in the distance, gliding through the night sky. Ray came over and put a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" Malik nodded slowly. "Yeah. I just keep thinking how all this started with one loose panel." Ray smiled. "Sometimes the smallest things lead to the biggest changes." Malik looked up at the stars. "Do you think I'll ever be able to build a real plane someday?" Ray chuckled.
Knowing you?
"I'd say that's a guarantee," Malik grinned. "Then that's what I'll do." He didn't know what the future would look like, but for the first time he could imagine it clearly. A sky full of possibilities, and somewhere among them a boy who had once shouted across a runway because he believed his voice could make a difference. And he had been right. Years passed. But Malik never forgot that day at the airport. He was still the same boy inside, curious and thoughtful, but the world around him had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. The scholarship from Harlow Technologies helped him finish school without worrying about money. Every year he received a letter from the company reminding him that the door was always open if he ever wanted to visit their headquarters. He kept studying airplanes, not just the way they flew, but the way people built them, tested them, and kept them safe. He loved the science, the mechanics, and the stories behind each invention. It wasn't easy. There were nights when he stayed up late solving problems that made his head spin, but he never gave up. His Uncle Ray always said, "You started this journey the day you spoke up. Keep that same courage for everything you do." And Malik did. By the time he was 18, he was already accepted into a top engineering program. On his first day of college, he stood in front of a huge jet engine on display in the school's lobby. It was shining under bright lights, almost like a monument. Malik smiled and whispered to himself, "One day I'll build something like this." His first year was tough. He struggled at times to keep up with other students who had better backgrounds or more resources. But whenever he felt lost, he'd think back to that moment on the runway, the sound of the wind, the fear in his chest, and the voice that told him to speak. He remembered what Harlow had said to him. Truth always connects. That memory pushed him through every challenge. During his second year, Malik received an invitation from Harlow Technologies to attend a Youth Innovation Summit. He almost couldn't believe it. The event was being held in New York, and he would get to meet engineers, inventors, and even pilots from all over the world. When he arrived, he was nervous at first. Everyone there seemed older, more confident. But once the event started, people recognized him from the story years ago. A few came over to shake his hand and say they were inspired by what he did as a kid. One woman told him, "My son saw your story on the news back then. It made him believe he could speak up too. Now he wants to study aviation safety." Malik smiled, a little overwhelmed. He hadn't realized his one act could reach that far. Later that evening, while walking through the exhibition hall, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "You didn't think I'd miss this, did you?" He turned around. It was Richard Harlow, older now, but still carrying that same calm presence. "Mr. Harlow," Malik said with a wide smile. "Just Richard," Harlow said, laughing softly. "You've grown up." Malik laughed too. "A little bit, I guess." They walked together through the exhibits, talking about new technology, electric engines, and sustainable fuel. Malik was surprised by how much Harlow remembered about their first meeting. "I'll never forget that day," Harlow said as they paused in front of a prototype aircraft. "When I think of how close we came to losing everything, and how one kid's voice changed it all." Malik looked at him and said quietly, "I was just lucky to notice it." Harlow shook his head. "No, it wasn't luck. It was awareness and courage. You can't teach that easily. You had something special then, and you still have it now." They spent almost an hour talking. Before they parted, Harlow said, "When you graduate, I want you to come work with us. You don't have to decide now, but the offer stands." Malik didn't know what to say. He just nodded. "Thank you." That means a lot. That night in his hotel room, he lay awake thinking about everything that had happened over the years. From a boy shouting on a runway to a young man being offered a job by the same person whose life he'd saved. Life had a strange way of coming full circle. A few years later, Malik graduated with honors. The ceremony was crowded, filled with families, laughter, and the smell of flowers. Ray sat in the front row wearing his best suit and wiping his eyes every few minutes. When Malik walked across the stage to receive his degree, he looked out and saw his uncle smiling proudly. After the ceremony, Ray hugged him tightly. "You did it, kid." "You really did it," Malik smiled. "Couldn't have done it without you." "I just gave you rides," Ray said. "You did the rest." 2 months after graduation, Malik joined Harlow Technologies as a junior engineer. The first day he walked into the headquarters, it felt surreal.
He had dreamed of this place for years. The wide glass walls, the smell of jet fuel in the testing bay.
The hum of engines being built. His first project was helping design a safer fuel valve system, the very kind of part that had once nearly caused disaster. When his supervisor asked him why he was so focused on that specific component, Malik smiled slightly and said, "Let's just say I've seen what happens when one of these isn't done right." Over time, Malik became known for his precision and his calm under pressure. He worked hard, sometimes late into the night, testing designs, rewriting reports, and making sure every tiny piece of an aircraft was perfect. A few years later, he led a small team on a project developing a self-monitoring flight safety system, a technology that could detect tampering or mechanical errors before takeoff. When the project succeeded, The company named it the Thompson Alert System in his honor. It was installed in hundreds of private jets around the world. One afternoon, during the official unveiling of the system, Harlow gave a short speech in front of the media. He said years ago a boy saw something no one else did. He spoke up and it changed everything. Today that same boy, now an engineer, has built something that will keep people safe for years to come. The audience clapped, and Malik stood quietly beside him, his heart full. After the event, Harlow turned to him and said, "You didn't just save my life anymore, Malik. You've saved countless others." Malik looked out at the hangar filled with planes and said softly, "I just did what anyone should do, pay attention and care." That evening, after everyone had gone home, Malik stayed back alone for a while. He walked around the quiet hangar, looking at the planes lined up neatly under the lights. He ran his hand along the smooth metal surface of one jet and smiled. It had been years since that first day, that loud, frightening day when he had shouted across the runway. But now, standing here as an engineer, he could see how every moment since then had led him here. Every late-night study session, every doubt, every challenge. It all mattered. He sat down on a nearby bench looking out at the open doors of the hangar. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken, painted with shades of orange and purple. A plane took off in the distance, its engines roaring softly. Malik watched it climb higher and higher until it became just a silver dot fading into the clouds. He thought about his younger self, the boy who once believed nobody would listen to him, who spoke up anyway. Now he knew something important. One voice, even a small one, could make a huge difference. As the years went on, Malik continued his work at Harlow Technologies. He traveled to schools to talk about aviation, courage, and curiosity. Kids listened with wide eyes as he told them about the day that changed his life. He never exaggerated, never made himself sound like a superhero. He always said the same thing. "I just saw something wrong and said something right." That simple sentence became part of who he was, his story, his lesson, his legacy. Eventually, the world moved on to new headlines, new stories, new heroes. But Malik's act never faded completely. It lived on quietly in the safety systems of modern aircraft, in the minds of young engineers, and in the gratitude of one man who never forgot what could have been. One afternoon, many years later, Malik returned to the same airport where it all began. He walked along the perimeter fence, feeling the warm breeze on his face. The place looked different now, newer buildings, shinier runways, but the air still carried that familiar scent of fuel and metal. He found the old hangar, now painted and renovated. Through the glass windows he could see a group of kids on a field trip, pointing at planes and asking questions. He smiled, remembering himself at their age. A teacher noticed him and waved. "You're Malik Thompson, right?" she asked. "The engineer who saved that plane years ago?" Malik nodded, a little embarrassed. "That's me," she smiled warmly. "Would you like to come in and talk to the kids? They're learning about aviation safety." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, I'd love to." As he stepped inside, the children's eyes lit up. They gathered around him, asking about planes, engines, and courage. He told them his story again, but this time he spoke slower, softer, like someone passing down a lesson, not just a memory. And when he finished, one of the kids raised her hand and asked, "Were you scared when you shouted that day?" Malik smiled gently. "Yes," he said. "I was scared. But sometimes being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you speak up anyway." The room went quiet and the children listened carefully. Later, as he left the hangar, Malik looked up at the sky one more time. A plane soared overhead, gleaming in the sunlight. He smiled, his heart peaceful. Life had come full circle. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "Stay curious," and with that, he walked away. The boy who once shouted across a runway, now a man who had built a safer sky.